Hi friends, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're going to be talking about seasonal bouquet succession planting, or we could probably call it seasonal bouquet recipes. I've talked about this a little bit in the past, but how I like to plan out my entire growing year is to break it down by bouquets. I find that that is incredibly helpful and it also saves me a lot of money, and I'll explain why. So what I like to do is write out focal flower, spike flower, secondary flower, disc flower, filler flower, and foliage for every single week that I plan to sell cup flowers. And then I basically just fill these in with what should be blooming that week, starting with focal, and I make sure that everything that I choose matches nicely, so I end up with a beautiful bouquet that is just naturally going to bloom together. So I like to start with the focal flower. That's usually where I spend the majority of my money. I normally now use corms, rhizomes, tubers, bulbs, instead of seeds to make up my focal flowers. And that's really because the flipping that I want to do, I want that to be a little less labor intensive than it was in the past. In the past, I was doing a ton of sunflower successions, but I don't have any machinery here. And I want to cut back on that a bit and lean into bulbs, which I can immediately cut down to the ground level, get those bulbs out of the soil very easily, and have another succession ready to go. So that's why I've decided to start to pull back on those sunflower successions and start to lean more into even more lily successions than I was doing in the past. But let's first take a look at mid-May. Now, as I discuss all of this, I'm discussing it from a Zone 6B garden located in south central Pennsylvania, where the last frost is generally late April, first frost is late October. So the focal flower that should be blooming in mid to late May is Aviv Pickety Pink White Ranunculus. We grew that last year together and it was so beautiful. Everyone loved it at the stand. I sold every single stem. When it got too hot, we dug up the corms together, I saved them, and we'll be planting them again this year. So I just start with that focal flower and build from there. Now I'm remembering that it's mid-May here in southern Pennsylvania, so the only things that are going to be blooming at that time of year are very early, cool flowers. So for my spike, I'm doing Costa Deep Rose 2 Snapdragon. That's a brand new Snapdragon this year. I'm also doing Chantilly Purple Snapdragon. Chantilly's are a group 1-2 Snapdragon. For my secondary flower, I'm doing Delft Blue Nigella. Now don't let that blue in the title fool you. It's really purple. Why do they do that to us? I have no idea, but I'm kind of going for this pink and purple palette up here. Next up, our disc flower is going to be White Finch Orlea, which I'm just going to direct sow. Now for our filler this time of year, I'm doing Sweet William, and I'm going to go ahead and do the Amazon series, which blooms a little bit later than the Sweet series, and I'm going to do Neon Rose, which I have grown a long time ago. I think I was like one of the first Sweet Williams that I ever grew, but I want to go back to Amazon because I feel like it was a little bit taller than the Sweet series, but just know it does bloom a little bit later. Now, the great thing about Sweet William, if you're growing cut flowers in the landscape, is that I do not find that Sweet William needs any kind of support. And foliage at that time of year, Solomon seal, is so beautiful. It's fresh and perfect, coming right out of the ground, ready for cutting. I have the variegated Solomon seal, and I cannot recommend that highly enough. So blooming at basically the same time, but in a different color palette, I'm doing another bouquet. So let's call this the last week of May bouquet. Once again, this really just helps me plan out what's going to be blooming when and what exactly to order and how much to order of that particular seed. So for this focal, we're doing Aviv Pickety Red Yellow, and that looks to me to be a mixture of red, orange, and yellow ranunculus. For the spike, I'm going to go ahead and do Potomac Early Sunrise Snapdragon. That's a mix in shades of a sunrise, and it looks like it will pair really nicely with the red-yellow Aviv ranunculus. For the secondary here, I'm just repeating that Delft blue Nigella because I think that deep purple will still work with the oranges and reds and yellow. Here I'm going to be changing out the disc. Instead of Orlea in this bouquet, I'm going to be doing Dara, which you guys know I love once again, so I'm picking up that deep eggplant from the Delft blue Nigella. I'm going to bring it through the Dara. For filler in this, I'm going to go ahead and do Bells of Ireland. Sometimes I do struggle with a fungus with Bells of Ireland, but I think as long as I can give them enough air around each plant, I may be able to avoid that. We'll see if I regret saying that. And for the foliage, once again, Solomon seal. So those are the bouquets that I have for mid and late May, and those flowers should continue to bloom through the beginning of June. I should be able to use these two bouquets as we continue on through the first and second week in June. Now, once we hit the third and fourth week in June, I'm going to switch from relying on ranunculus as focal flowers and instead switch to my first succession of Asiatic lilies. Asiatic lilies are the first to bloom. They don't have any fragrance, which I feel is really great because then you can attract people that like the look of lilies but don't like the fragrance. But most importantly, Asiatic because they're the earliest to bloom. So for a mid-June bouquet, what I'm doing is the focal is Forever Susan Asiatic lilies, and that is really a hot orange lily with black streaks running toward the center. Now, I don't know if this is helpful or not to say, but I actually do not like that kind of a color palette. However, it's not what I like, but it is what sells. And I find over and over again that these really bold, punchy colors make people stop at the flower stand. And so that's why I choose to kind of grow a mix of the pinks, which I like, the more subtle pinks, purples, and deep magentas, and also what's going to attract people to the stand from the start, which are kind of those poppy oranges. So we got Forever Susan Asiatic lilies. Then I'm coming in with another new Snapdragon. This is a group 3 Snapdragon now. Monaco Orange Snapdragon, really bright orange, really punchy. I'm gonna still rely on Dara because for me, Dara really does continue to just keep on producing as long as I keep on cutting it. For the filler, Magic Green Feverfew will be blooming all over the landscape. I have that heavily planted in the hydrangea room. I allowed part of it to reseed itself. Some of it I planted as fall planted cool flowers in the driveway garden. So we'll have plenty of feverfew to pair with these Forever Susan Asiatic lilies. And then in terms of foliage this time of year, generally, forsythia is not strong enough for me to cut it, so instead I'm relying on Bupleurum, which I grow directly from seed. Now what's different with this bouquet versus the ranunculus bouquets is that these Asiatic lilies, I'm going to just cut them down at ground level, compost the bulbs, and call it a day. I don't always do that with lily bulbs, but I have found that it actually is cost effective for me to go ahead and do that because I only need to put one stem of an Asiatic lily in a bouquet to elevate it enough to sell it. And at this point in my time here on this property, I really cannot fit any more lilies into the landscape. So when these 50 are done, cut, and sold, I need to have another 50 ready to go. And so I'll plant these pretty much at the same time. I'm going to do a focal for the last week of June, the Royal Sunset Lily. And if you remember, we grew that together last year, and I was a little bit skeptical of the color in the picture versus real life, because in the picture I do feel like it's overly saturated, but it does have pink and orange in it. So since I have all of these oranges coming on and all of these eggplants, but I also have some pinks still remaining, I thought that would still be a good choice. So to pair with Royal Sunset, I'm going with the Costa Rose 2 Snapdragon, which is a little bit lighter than Costa Deep Rose, of course. By this point, my secondary flower is a straw flower. A cool flower planted straw flower will be blooming by the end of June in my area. For the disc, I'm using Whitefinch Orlea, but I'm not using it white. I'm waiting, and at this point it's going to be a green seed head, so that'll pair nicely with these oranges. I'm going to use the Saponaria that I fell in love with a few years ago. I interplanted Saponaria and lilies, and that worked out perfectly. And then once again, I'm bringing in Bupleurum to basically fill out the bouquet and give me the foliage that I need that time of year. So now that we know exactly what we're going to be planting for these late spring into early summer bouquets, let me just quickly walk you through exactly where everything's going to be located. That way, as I do more of these videos and talk about the successions, we can all visualize together how this works. So currently, in these 4 central beds, we have tulips that I'm going to be selling in April and also holding over for Mother's Day. So by the time cool flowers are ready to go into the ground, these will be available as well. So in mid to late February, we'll be planting our pre-sprouted ranunculus corms into the front raised beds. Those currently don't have anything in them. This has some of the Saving Grace dahlias in it, just to see if they overwinter, but I'll be removing those before the ranunculus go in. I do want to eventually widen this central path, but since I already have bulbs in here, that's going to have to wait. So the tulips will bloom in April, we'll remove those, then we'll immediately plant them with lilies and lilies, which I'm going to interplant with Saponaria over here and interplant with Bupleurum over here. On the exterior beds, the back is going to be Dara, the front is going to be Nigella. Over here we'll have a whole bed of straw flower. These 2 beds currently don't have anything in them, and because of that, that's where our very early snapdragons are going to go. They'll need floral netting. Back here we currently have daffodils planted that I'm going to let perennialize in my raised beds. After those daffodils come out, we'll go ahead and have Orlea over here and Bells of Ireland over here. And the reason why I'm choosing Orlea and Bells of Ireland for these back raised beds is that I want these beds cleared out again by the end of June so that I can plant out pre-sprouted dahlias on top of those daffodils. So I hope it's helpful to hear what's in these raised beds. And in the landscape, we have Feverfew and we will have Sweet William. So friends, I hope this video was helpful, and I really feel like I could talk about this even longer, so maybe I'll follow it with a Q&A. But also, when I go to choose what flowers I'm going to grow, I'm also considering what are my neighbors selling. I try to sell something different than them. I also take pest and disease issues that are prevalent in my area into consideration. I try not to grow anything that is really susceptible to bugs that I know are a problem here or diseases that I know are a problem here. So for instance, I could have mentioned as a spike in these early bouquets something like stock, but I just have too many problems with stock to want to grow that anymore, and stock also makes the water smell like cabbage. So that's the reason why I lean more into snapdragons and not into stock at all. But with that being said, if you have any questions about what blooms when, please just drop me a comment. I try to be very, very responsive in the comment section. And please let me know if you'd like to continue this series. If we do continue on, I'll probably do July and August bouquets as a video, and then go ahead and do September and October. I want to wish you all a wonderful day out there in your gardens. If you like this video, please help me out. Give me a thumbs up. That really helps me a lot. And Grace and I want to wish you happy gardening. Bye.